On the morning of December 22nd, 1978, the body of 16-year-old LydiaContrerez was found here at the corner of Indian Creek and Pryor Creek roads. Her body was discovered by Warden School bus driver Clyde Fleming, who was en route to pick up his bus for his morning rounds. At first, he wasn't sure what he had seen. He stopped to investigate and discovered Corrina's body face down in a pool of blood. He went to a rancher's house to notify authorities. He and the rancher came back to the body, where Mr. Fleming placed a blanket over it, so the children he would eventually be picking up would not see it. Corrina's killer has never been found. Well, let's discuss the LydiaContrerez. She was a young woman, very young, 16, 17, lived on the south side with her father and a big family. He was struggling to raise the children on his own. There had been other tragedies in her life. A couple of siblings had died.
Yes.
So this morning of the discovery of her body, she had taken off from her home to do what at 3 in the morning?
Well, as we've gone back and reviewed this case, it appears that was not uncommon for her. That for her to, despite her young age, she was, again, just as Marcia Helgelson was, she was very comfortable leaving her house at 3 o'clock in the morning to go visit friends and to go hang out with a boyfriend or with other friends, and that was not uncommon at all. She lived in a very close-knit community where she would pass back and forth between family and friends' homes easily, and I would say that it would not be uncommon for her family, her father in particular, to maybe not know where she was. And not in a neglectful way, just she had that kind of freedom. She was had the freedom to be very comfortable in the Billings community on her own.
One of the news articles said she may have been hitchhiking to Pryor to see a boyfriend.
That certainly is possible from different angles. There were certainly friends in town that she had spent time with, and that conversation never came up. Not to say that couldn't have happened or something you wouldn't tell your friends.
Do you think she knew her killer?
Because of her lifestyle, it's hard to say for sure, but I can't imagine anyone, will get into a car with a complete stranger at 3 o'clock in the morning without having some level of comfort.
Who'd found her body?
I believe it was a bus driver, not someone connected necessarily, but was on their route. And again, where her body was found was, while it was a very rural area, it was also near a residence. It just calls to mind or to thought that if you had murdered someone and wanted to dump their body, you could dump to any one of a million places in rural Montana, but to put it basically in someone's driveway is remarkable.
What kind of suspects then were rounded up in this case? Friends, family?
Yes, and again, that became a large confusion. While there are a couple elements of the case we really can't discuss, I can tell you that there was some evidence that tied back to her neighborhood. And family and friends, none of which were known to have any kind of problem with her, certainly that would lead to this, but certainly tied back to the neighborhood she lived in. It's certainly unknown exactly who the suspect or suspects may have been, except for the fact that, again, all arrows pointed back to the neighborhood she grew up in.
Did she have enemies there?
Not necessarily enemies. Again, she's a 16-year-old kid who can come and go kind of as she pleases, and I don't think that necessarily you know really how evil the world can be.
Mm-hmm. Was she clothed when her body was found?
Partially.
Partially clothed. Was she sexually assaulted?
Again, I can't say.
Was the boyfriend questioned?
Many people, including the boyfriend, were questioned. Okay. Again, in this case, just as the other case, the level of investigative skill that went into this was outstanding. This case, because it led immediately back to other areas, was much more involved in a lot of different angles that had to be addressed, and a lot of the leads that followed out. As the cold case unit was convened a few years back, this was the case where people from that neighborhood came forward with ideas more than any other cold cases.
Was she also stabbed?
She was.
Was her murder as brutal as the murder of Marcia Helgeson?
Not in my opinion. However, it was still a very violent crime.
Do you believe the two are connected?
As an investigator who's been doing this for 18 years, the coincidences are too much to ignore. There's no way for me to say for sure, because in my job and career, I've had that moment where, well, I can't believe that's actually a coincidence. But I have a hard time believing that, based on looking at the two crime scenes and the ages of the victims and the lifestyle of the victim, that there's no connection to them. I find that hard to believe.
Yeah. And both bodies in somewhat rural areas, discovered in somewhat rural areas, but as you say, near a residence.
That's exactly right, and that's too much of a coincidence for me to ignore.
Do you imagine that this is a male suspect?
You know, historically we talk about these crimes being committed by a male subject, but to be that closed-minded is a mistake. So I keep my mind open to anything that might come along.
Was Ms. Contrerez a prostitute?
I have no evidence of her being a prostitute at all. I do have evidence of her being, I don't want to say a wild child. That's not fair to say. That's a tough assumption. But again, she was 16 years old in 1978 who had the ability to leave her house at 3 o'clock in the morning and not raise any real eyebrows in the neighborhood.
Were there other similarities between her murder and the murder of Marcia Helgeson?
There were some.
Was there evidence at the scene?
Yes.
As much as Ms. Helgeson's?
Maybe not as much, but similar.
So what do you want people to do who are watching this?
I want people to think back. I want them to sit back with their cup of coffee and don't go on with their lives for 5 minutes. I want them to think about their times. Did they know these people? Did they know their family members? Did they know their friends? In the months after these homicides, did they see anything or hear anything? In a bar, at work, with friends? Sit back and think for us. Think for these women of something that might come up. We are so close on some of these cases. We just need one more piece, and we know what's out there. And we've said this before at these interviews, and we'll do it again. We know that circumstances change, that relationships change, that people pass away, people go to prison, and people who may have been afraid to speak about something earlier for whatever reason might be more comfortable now. Dig deep in your soul. Dig out and give us a call. We know when people know out there. We do.